Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 288 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The Second Amendment podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weirdbeard, and with me tonight, she's wonderful. She's amazing. She's patient. She's really patient. She's amazingly patient. She's glamorous. Erin, she's the greatest hostess in the world. Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
Do you ever get tired of kissing my butt?
Nope.
Okay.
But I'll let you know when it happens.
Okay.
Erin, I will get tired of kissing your butt when you stop being so awesome. She laughs because she thinks she's not awesome, and everybody listening here is like, how come she doesn't know she's awesome?
Imposter syndrome and poor self-image. Also probably undiagnosed rejection sensitivity disorder. Anyway, moving on.
Oh, God. Yeah. Rejection sensitivity disorder. Oh, God. Do I know it deeply?
Yeah, I'm not doing real great. No one wants to hear me complain. So I'm not going to talk about what happened, but the short version is I've been very angry, and not at anyone you know, but we'll just go with government. And I've gotten all the anger and frustration out of my system, and now I'm just crashing, and I'm tired, and yeah. I mean, it's not that I don't want to do the show, it's just I'm kind of so my heart's not in it, and I apologize for that. But I mean, I don't know how much detail you want to go into, Weird, but you've also not had a great day, so we may just phone this episode in, and I'm okay with that.
Yes, I too have also gotten out my anger, and unfortunately my anger was at my daughter, who had a very rough day today, and I don't blame her on that, and I'm not going to embarrass her on the particulars, but obviously, as you know, there was no show last week because we were on vacation. We went down to D.C., and before I get into the D.C. vacation, I will just say that all parents know that transitions are definitely a thing, and that first day after a vacation is always a rough one, and so yeah, that's that is unfortunately true in today's instance. Hopefully tomorrow the smoke will clear. But we went down to D.C. We drove it, which was awesome. I was telling my wife, I am so glad that my daughter tolerates long car rides because I really enjoy a nice long road trip. And my wife did an amazing job. I have praised her on multiple occasions during the vacation. I'm going to praise her on the podcast. She planned out the stops along the way expertly. And so it was like we would drive for 3 hours, and then we would stop for something cool, and then drive for another 3 hours, and stop for something cool, and then drive for another 3 hours. And so yeah, our stopping points were stop one whenever traveling the Eastern Corridor is the Palisades Mall in West Nyack, New York. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it, but that's how I pronounce it when I see it on the side. It's a gigantic shopping mall, not quite Mall of America size, but it does have a Ferris wheel in the food court. And I always used to stop there when I was driving up and down the East Coast as a fisheries observer, because by traveling through White Plains, you stay away from the George Washington Bridge, which is a cursed landmass. Under no circumstance should anyone ever go on that friggin' bridge. I've traveled across it twice, and I've regretted both times. So we went there first, and actually my wife booked us at an escape room there. There's like 3 or 4 different escape room places in the mall that we saw, and I think the place that we went to was called number 4 Wits. And we did their Egyptian tomb one, and it's actually not quite an escape room, though kind of. It's more of very, very elaborate puzzle solving. set up. And
I mean, that's what a escape room is, though. You gotta find the clues and solve the puzzle to get out.
Yeah. Though every other escape room that I've ever done almost always relies on some level of like locks, and also this one was much more linear. Most escape rooms, there's definitely multiple clues are scattering around, and you've got to kind of organize them into, all right, these ones go to this lock or this puzzle, these ones go to this one or this one. It was more of you're in a room and here's what you need to figure it out. And if you figure it out, you go into the next room, and then there's something for you to figure out, and then go into the next room. And what was great was there was one puzzle that we still to this point, we still have no earthly idea how the hell we used to solve it. And the game master just like gave us a free pass. Here's a mulligan on this, go into the next one. And we were actually able to complete the room. And so we had a ton of fun. So we did that and stopped for lunch, and then went down to, it's not the Crayola factory, but they call it like the Crayola experience. I'm trying to remember. It's in Easton, Pennsylvania is where it is. And we did that. And, I was wondering if my daughter was a little too old for it, but she's super into like arts and crafts anyway. She was super into it. We had a whole lot of fun there. And
how old is she at this point?
She's 10. And so,
okay. Yeah. I would be wondering too.
Yep. No, exactly. But like, she is like any sort of art supply she's super duper into. So crayons, super fun. And it was really, really cool too. Like they had like a whole thing where like you could like pick out a crayon, drop it into a machine. And these were unwrapped crayons, drop it into the machine. It would suck it into the machine, melt it, and dump it into a mold, and pop out a little widget made from a crayon for it. And it was like heating it and then rapidly cooling it so that it would solidify quickly.
Into what?
She made a ring, but there was also like you get like a car. There was a bunch of a bunch of little widgets that you could get. They had a little machine where you could draw a picture on a piece of like heavy duty cardstock and stick it into the machine. It would stamp it out with a die, and it would come out as a jigsaw puzzle.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, she got like 5 of those. Yeah, so no, it was pretty fun. Like it's probably, in the next year or so, she would have absolutely no interest in it. So I think we got it like right at the tail end, but like she was super into it. And then it was straight on to DC from there. And then on the way back, we stopped at in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and went to the Hershey Museum, which was fun. It's not the greatest museum it's a good museum. It's just I felt that it wasn't set up very well. You were kind of dancing around different things. It would be nice if it was either more chronological or more by subject, as opposed to just kind of all piled together. But we still had fun. It was a quick stopover, stretch our legs. There was a distillery next door, and then we went back to the Palisades Mall, really just to do some shopping and just stretch our legs, and then home. So that part was awesome. And then we had a great time in DC. We did a bunch of major sites. I will have to say one thing I wanted actually to talk about to that. And actually, I forgot to mention to David before the show, because I actually specifically wanted to talk to him. We went to the Holocaust Museum. It was actually one of the first things that we went to. And
keep it light.
Yeah, but my daughter was definitely I'm feeling really uncomfortable here. I'm like, yep, that's the whole point. Good. that means it's working. But number one, like, we were going through and the security was really, really tight. And my wife's like, man, they got a lot of security here. I'm like, have you not been following the news? And she goes, oh. So yeah, they are on DEF CON. Like, anybody wants to pull some crap at the Holocaust Museum, they're not going to be happy with what they get. That's definitely a screw around and find out place to play around with. But like literally the most powerful moment of me being in DC was we entered into the exhibit where it's talking about how essentially some of the first people to be executed in the Holocaust were the people who were in the asylums and the quote unquote defectives, and all that. And it just so happened to be that there was a gentleman in the room. I think he was he might have even been a younger guy. It's kind of hard to tell, who had Treacher-Collins syndrome. And he was just standing there absolutely just gobsmacked. And
I don't know what Treacher-Collins syndrome is.
It's a, it's mostly I believe there's no cognitive impairments whatsoever. I believe it's all affecting the bones in the face. There's like some very, very strong deformities in the face, like missing cheekbones and often missing the openings to the ears.
Okay.
I can pull up a quick image of somebody with it.
I'm sorry. For some reason, I thought this was relevant to the story. I should have known better. My bad.
No. But just the, this was somebody who, number one, was not a cognitively impaired person with a genetic disorder, but someone who very, very much physically would be recognized as someone with a genetic disorder. We'll just say to keep things PC, and all of that. And it was one of those, like, the weight of all of that, especially since obviously, I mean, number one, the Holocaust Museum is heavily funded by Jewish groups and very much focuses on the Jewish side of the Holocaust, but in no way, shape, or form do they downplay, the gypsies and the homosexuals and the communists and the other groups that were executed as well. And so just to have this kind of exhibit in the, let's say, lesser known or lesser recognized part of the Holocaust with someone who very clearly would have been targeted was extremely powerful. And I just wanted to mention that was just with Weirdbeard, tears often come easy, and they came pretty hard and fast, and I hope I didn't make anybody uncomfortable. But
are they still doing the thing where when you enter, you're given a little booklet with a picture of somebody and their biography, and it tells you, at which camp they died and when?
Or actually, mine survived. Some of them survived.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I mean, that makes sense, but it's just I didn't think they did that for the living. I thought they only memorialized the dead.
Nope.
So.
Yes. No. Some of them survived, but all of them went to a camp or another. At least all the ones that I've seen. I've gone a couple of times, and again, it is a heavy museum, as it should be for the subject matter. But I highly recommend it. It is one of the better museums I have ever been to. There's one point where you're walking in and you suddenly are walking on cobblestones, and my wife and daughter didn't read the plaque that I had read, but was like, no, these cobblestones were pulled up from the Warsaw Ghetto and reassembled in DC. And I'm like, wow, that's to walk along the cobblestones. They get you. And so, and like I said, my daughter was like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable here. I'm like, yep, that is exactly this should not be forgettable, and this should not be pleasant. This should not be, oh, what a wonderful museum that was. No, it is a horrific museum, but they also hit that nice spot that no, I'm not worried about giving my daughter nightmares or anything like that, but also like we've told her about the Holocaust. We've told her about World War II and a lot of the aspects of it. And I've definitely referenced Hitler on many occasions with her. Like, who's that? Well, let me explain who that is. And I don't think I'll be getting that who's that again after that. She will now get, oh yeah, no, I get it. So yeah, no, that was wonderful. Also, we went up to the top of the Washington Monument. I've never actually been up. Of all the times I've been in DC, I've never been to the top of the Washington Monument, and I regret not going up more. That was awesome. I think that's actually my daughter's favorite thing there.
Did the tour guide point out the difference in the marble quality?
They did.
Okay.
Yep. No, that is and yeah, I noticed it. I specifically noticed it for the fact that I'm from Portland, Maine, and Portland Headlight, aka the lighthouse that's in every calendar that has lighthouses from it. That Portland Headlight, it was not like that where they actually pulled from different quarries over different times to build it, but it was a certain height when it was first commissioned, which was actually in the I believe that was in the late 18th century, but I believe George Washington actually but either way, I believe George Washington commissioned that lighthouse. But after a few years, they decided they wanted to be a little higher to get some more penetration. So they added a few more. They raised up the light, and so there's a difference in the block construction, similar to that. So I noticed it, but the tour guide specifically mentioned about coming from different quarries and and the blocks were cut at different times.
Well, yeah, but do you know why that is? Because you haven't said the magic word Civil War.
Okay, I either heard that and missed it because there was a lot going on, or it wasn't mentioned, but it was because of the Civil War.
That was what I heard when I was touring and living in DC, that they had started building it and then they had to stop because of the Civil War, and I didn't know if it was because, they couldn't source the marble, or it was being used for other things, or just, supply lines were screwy, but they had to pause. And then when they were able to start rebuilding however many years later, they couldn't get the same type of marble, which is why there's a very obvious line.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yep. So I assume, and see, the reason I'm asking is because, I started to say it's been 20 years, but no, in 2019, I actually went back there to give a speech. But from 99 to 2000, it was just the beginning of 2005. I did a slow orbit of the Beltway. I didn't live in DC, but I lived in Maryland, I lived in Virginia, and I would frequently commute in to DC to work. And so that's why I'm asking some of these questions. I assume you did the smart thing and used the metro instead of driving to the various tourist places.
We stayed at the LaFont Hilton, so we were actually right in the heart of it. So we were actually able to walk.
Oh, perfect.
That first day, the LaFont Plaza, the Spy Museum is like right there. So that was actually the first thing we hit, which again, that's also another one of my favorite museums of all time. And so we did the Spy Museum, and then we walked down to the Holocaust Museum, and actually walked over to the Washington Monument briefly. And then as Tiny feet and my wife's feet started getting much more tired towards the end of the week, we would actually usually take an Uber out and then work our way back in. So we didn't use the metro this time. I have used the metro in the past, and the metro is really good there. But in this case, we would usually just take one, sometimes two Ubers in a day.
So the metro, and I'm looking at a new map, and they added the Silver Line, which they didn't have before, but it still got the same inherent problem which it had when I was there, and that the metro is optimized for one thing and one thing only: getting people into and out of the district. And so if you're trying to get to... Well, all right. If you are at 9 o'clock and you're trying to get to 12 o'clock, there's not an easy way to... Well, actually, there's a fairly easy way. It's just not at all convenient. You ride the line in and you transfer and you go up. like I said, it's all about going in and out. It doesn't go around at all.
Mm-hmm.
And at least when I was there, someone was talking about creating a purple line, which more or less paralleled the Beltway so that people could actually get to where they were going and also clear up a lot of the congestion in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Save that for the people who are actually going into work. And so I am, on the one hand, I'm disappointed. On the other hand, I'm not at all surprised that DC continues to be this way.
Yeah. Well, there was one time when I went with my parents, and my parents are avid hikers, and I am an avid distance walker. And so, like, yeah, no, walking 20 miles in a day is no big deal for me. I'll be tired at the end of a 20 mile day, but it's not that much for me. My wife and daughter, not so much. But yeah, normally when I would do DC, it would be, I would get myself to one location and then just hop. Since Capitol Hill, there's, if you're meticulous, you can plan it so that when you get to point A, you can make it to point X by the end of the day. But in our case, we used Ubers.
So this is a long intro. Good luck editing that.
That's the cool thing. I won't. But that is a very ham-fisted segue for us to get into the news. And
I really wasn't trying to segue.
But I'm going to say, speaking of the Virginia area, but in fact, we're talking about New York. We have
the Lairds of Fairfax.
Yes. Yeah. The NRA's headquarters is in Fairfax, Virginia, but in fact, the NRA is incorporated in New York, which is where essentially Wayne LaPierre, among others, are being sued by essentially Letitia James, who was on a witch hunt, but she, much to everyone's surprise, she found a coven of witches. And there has been a verdict, and I don't think anyone will be surprised that Wayne LaPierre was found. I mean, do you find guilty? I don't know, because this is a civil case. They didn't charge him criminally, which again seems weird. But
yeah, I was surprised too. Well, I don't know if the proper term is found guilty, but he was definitely found, I guess, culpable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he has to pay $4.4 million. Would have been $5 million, but he's already repaid $1 million.
Yes, and this is I will say that in my show prep, I didn't end up putting all the various videos that I watched on this and podcasts and all that, but everybody else has been covering this as well, but we would be remiss not to. But Mr. Guns and Gear had the great point of pointing out the fact that Wayne LaPierre got himself a very, very delectable golden parachute that will more than cover this. So he will be essentially paying back the NRA for money that he misappropriated with money that the NRA, in my opinion, misappropriated by giving him for his loyal service of doing what may be irreparable damage to the NRA.
I mean, I actually think everyone involved got off light.
Yes.
And just like you, I thought there were going to be some criminal charges rather than just fines and slaps on the hand.
I mean, of the stuff that he was doing, like essentially the biggest smoking gun was the Ackerman McQueen gave Wayne LaPierre their credit card and told him to, go wild. This is where he got the $250,000 in suits from a London tailor. And then he could expense it back to Ackerman McQueen, or Ackerman McQueen could expense it to the NRA as Ackerman McQueen expenses. And so it would just essentially it was money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of those, like, how is that not criminal? And how do they did not have him dead to rights enough for them to go for it? I don't fully understand. But essentially, Wayne LaPierre is going to be paying back, essentially $5.5 million, but for stuff that he has documented paying back already, he's only on the hook for $4.4 million, but he got paid way more than that as essentially a retirement bonus from the NRA for his resignation.
Yeah, so basically the NRA is going to pay him to pay them back.
Correct. And so, this is, it's again, more of the same, dirty pool money laundering, stuff going on. But Wayne's out and a few other people are out due to this. And, there's talk on, whether or not they're going to be barred from, being part of charitable groups. I mean, I suspect Wayne's just done. I think he's just going to be happily retire on a bed full of money. I mean, he's 74 years old. Like, it's that's more than plenty for retirement age, especially given again how lucrative he's been raking it in on NRA members' money. But so the question is, what happens going forward? And again, we've been critical of hell of the NRA, and I have my doubts on how it could survive, but I do hope that it would. I would absolutely love for it to turn back into the pro Second Amendment group that it once was. Say at the time of the Cincinnati Revolt, of which every anti-gun group talks about as like an extremist takeover, but in fact, no, the anti-gunners led an extremist takeover of the NRA, and the NRA was, for a period of time, somewhere between, from everything that I've read and seen, somewhere between when the vets returned from World War II to, what was it, 72 was the Cincinnati Revolt? Do you remember off the top of your head, Aaron?
I don't.
I believe it was 72. But from somewhere between the late 40s to the early 70s, the NRA really got kind of taken over by the FUDs, to be pejorative because they deserve it, of the people that were no longer concerned with defense against tyrannical governments and or violent criminals, and were instead more concerned about games, shooting ducks and deer and pieces of paper and clay targets. And
1977.
Okay, thank you so much. So later than I thought, but either way, is the NRA was founded as a paramilitary group by Union generals. That's why it was formed in New York, because it was after the Civil War, and these Union generals formed it as a means to get essentially city folk more familiar with shooting and essentially rifle work, so that in the event that there's another draft, they considered the city, the conscripts from the city to be ill prepared for rifle work. And so they wanted to make sure that there were rifle competitions and shooting competitions and other stuff, so that people would be, there would be a better stock of soldiers in the event that we needed them for another war. And it was only about after World War II that the idea that we would entertain gun control or focus on hunting and sport shooting was just a radical opinion. And so, but either way, after that, unfortunately, as good as the Cincinnati Revolt was at cleaning out the gun control lovers out of the NRA, they did change a lot of the bylaws, making it essentially impossible for another one to happen. And we witnessed that firsthand in 2019 when we were at the NRA annual meeting and saw them try to potentially successfully oust Wayne LaPierre, and shenanigans were pulled, and Wayne LaPierre was unanimously kept as executive vice president, despite multiple people saying, no, I voted to get rid of him. So, yeah,
What did you mean when you said the NRA was originally a paramilitary organization?
The fact that it was formed by military groups for military preparation. Am I using the term incorrectly?
I mean, I feel like you are. Just when I hear paramilitary, I think like militia, because the definition of paramilitary that I'm familiar with is an organization that, while it isn't specifically the military, it has structure and tactics and training and things like that, which are very similar to the military. I mean, I feel like you could make a case in point that a lot of police organizations are paramilitary. I mean, I get what you're going for. The grammarian in me, and my pedantic ass, I wanted to address that, because there are a lot of people who, the gun owners, you want to form a militia, you want to practice for the overthrow of the country, and it's like, no, that's not quite. I mean, the only way it was related to the military was, as you said, Union generals got tired of having their troops outshot by the Confederate boys who would go hunting regularly for food, and they decided, we need to close this gap. So
yeah, no, I was using it. I mean, I was and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. I was using it very similar to, I believe, while you say militia, which has a lot of connotations here in the United States.
True.
I was actually using it more on the sense of either actually in the actually the Soviet states actually referred to their police force as militia. And then also you've got, like, in France and several other countries, I believe, also use the term the gendarmerie. I'm probably mispronouncing that.
Gendarmes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
but
those
are almost universally also described as paramilitary, in the fact that they are not the military, but they are trained to a standard approaching the military, and have military actions. And I see that as the original charter of the NRA was very much of that, where it was essentially boot camp but for fun.
Yeah. A lot like what Appleseed is today.
Very much like Appleseed. That was exactly what I was thinking as I was saying that, is Project Appleseed very much mimics the original charter of the NRA. Maybe actually very, very similarly, in the fact that we are teaching military exercises and preparation for military service, but we're not going so far as to actually, making you cadets. So yeah, no, you are right in the fact that, yes, paramilitary as well as militia has some negative connotations, as well as positive connotations as well. And yeah, but I am using it strictly in that, the Latin sense of the word para, next to military. So it's not the military, but it's the next door over. But either way, I hope things go well for them. Proceed with caution. People who are like me, who might be life members of the NRA, and so I'm not surrendering my card because I already paid for it. But I'm also still, when that donation envelope comes in, I'm not going to be putting any money in it anytime soon until I see that things are going through. And I will note that maybe things will continue to be as rotten. Certainly I have heard not a whole lot of good things about the current executive vice president, in the fact that he is, I'll throw some shade. He's been noted as a sycophant for Wayne for a long time, and someone who has definitely been complicit in some of Wayne's crimes. He wasn't implicated in any of these, and as of now is unindicted, but I think that unindicted co-conspirator might fit quite well. Yeah. Maybe I'm getting in trouble. Maybe the rum is speaking, but either way, I am very wary of them. It could be that this is a come to Jesus moment and the NRA is going to go back to that original charter and we will suddenly have a pro Second Amendment group that cares about all the things that our founding fathers did when they drafted the Second Amendment. It could be that because the NRA is so hobbled by all this negative publicity that they will, while they will have nefarious ideas, will become the organization that everyone wants them to become so that they can get members to fleece, of which case support but be cautious. I don't know. Time will tell, and certainly we will be reporting on anything we've seen here on the NRA moving forward. I hope they set forward because we got lots of Second Amendment group, and we certainly talked about if the NRA is to fall, likely the various Second Amendment groups will kind of cobble together the various duties of the NRA, but I don't think that they'd ever replace what the NRA does. But also one thing I will note is that certainly all the discovery that's happened in this trial has shown that what the NRA is doing is over the last decade hasn't been a lot for us. And holy crap, what will the NRA be if it does suddenly start actually caring about the Second Amendment on the likes of many of the other Second Amendment groups that you guys may be supporting in this power vacuum that has come from the NRA faltering. They call the NRA the 500-pound gorilla, but we always joke about the fact that, but now the NRA's been in DEF CON defending itself, and still we've been doing a pretty darn good job. So it shows that they really have been pulling their weight. Imagine if they started to.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, because Letitia James is quoted in the article as saying she wants an independent monitor to be appointed to oversee the NRA's administration of charitable assets. And I'm being cynical here. I know that it says independent, but this is New York State, and this is the location of Realpolitik, and I feel like, well, let's just say that I have my doubts about the true independence and impartiality of any sort of monitor, and I would love to be surprised. I'm just saying, if you control the money, then you can control the activities as to what it supports. Whether it is actually going to be filing amicus briefs, or if the monitor says, no, I'm not going to approve that transfer of money. Mm-hmm. And so
I don't think you're being the least bit paranoid about that.
Okay.
I'm not overly concerned about that. Like I said, I don't think the NRA has been doing a whole hell of a lot for a while now. But
I mean, certainly not for the past 5 years.
No, definitely not for the first 5 years. I may even argue 10. It really has been kind of out to lunch. But so the number I keep hearing when talking about the independent advisor is like a year. And so what's my opinion is, what's another year? It may very much hobble the NRA completely for another year, but that gives them more time to rebuild, and hopefully rebuild for good, not for kleptocracy. Again, but time will tell. And like I said, we will report on what we hear and see. But again, that's also still to be determined if the independent auditor is going to be appointed or not. So again, that'll mm-hmm. be probably be for next week's show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I am surprised. I think a lot of people were surprised back in 2022 when a Manhattan judge ruled against Letitia James because she wanted to have the entire organization dissolved.
Yeah.
And the New York judge said that, no, this doesn't warrant a corporate death penalty. And I honestly thought that's where that was going. So They are already more fortunate. The organization as a whole, I mean, not the members or the board, but yeah, they dodged that death blow, and I'm really surprised. So they might be able to pull it off.
Yeah, and another thing is that Letitia James was after the NRA, but in fact it was only Wayne LaPierre and several of his co-conspirators that actually were under the gun. And in fact, the money that Wayne LaPierre is paying, we said it at the start, but again, it needs to be reiterated. He's paying back the NRA. He's not paying the state of New York. He's not paying a fine. He's paying back money that he misappropriated. So it's all going in-house. The NRA is the victim in this court case. So that is also good news for the NRA. And again, I hope they use it for good. We're on a precipice here.
Yeah, I'm really surprised there weren't any punitive charges. I'm also really surprised that this didn't constitute a breach of the Golden Parachute contract.
I mean, I'm legitimately surprised Wayne LaPierre is not being frog marched into a cell right now. So either way, we missed it entirely. Wayne LaPierre left the NRA neither in handcuffs or in a casket. So again, we will be keeping a close eye on this, because this is again big Second Amendment news. I'm glad to see that Wayne's out, and that he will be paying back some of the money that he was paid to pay back to pay. It's stupid.
It's all circular.
So stupid. But either way, at least it's over. Letitia James found her witch and burned it, and we'll see if she goes on more. Probably more than likely now the NRA will do their move to Texas as they suggested. So because now they're free of the investigation, which was keeping them from moving to Texas in the first place. So likely they will be re-headquartering quite soon to get the heck away from New York. Very similar to Smith & Wesson leaving Massachusetts, when essentially Massachusetts said, we're going to declare a law to make Smith & Wesson illegal. And even though it didn't pass, they're like, you know what? We're not going to stick around for the next time you try. So yeah, likely the NRA will be leaving New York very soon, and we will see if they actually start doing things to start regaining trust and start rebuilding the group, or if they start stealing anything that isn't nailed down. But pivoting from that sardonic laugh to some legitimate comedy.
Yeah, you and I have different tastes in comedy.
Yeah, well, while I was in DC, and it is I guess it was published in December, so it's a little bit older. But again, the news story just uncovered it. But it is from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and let's see, in the authors are Tim Carey, Kelly Roskam, and Joshua Horowitz, the Oompa Loompa of gun control, formerly of the Coalition Against Gun Violence, the psycho ex-girlfriend of the gun control movement. I will note, I called him the psycho ex-girlfriend of the gun control movement because I, for a period of time during the golden age of gun blogs, when I may have been regularly posting my gun blogs, I may have had a file on my computer with the addresses of various key members of this group, not because I was intending to dox them or do anything like that. And in no way, shape, or form do I feel like these addresses or numbers are current anymore, but because I wanted to have a nice amount of information to give over to law enforcement in case they cross that line, because I saw them cross a lot of lines. Like, namely, Lad Everett, who is no longer with the group, or really in the gun control movement right now, published George Zimmerman's home address while he was indicted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. or indicted for the killing of Trayvon Martin. He was found, it was self-defense, per the law. So it wasn't a murder, but he was charged with murder. I saw that specifically as a call for, will someone handle this troublesome priest?
Nice reference.
Thank you. There was this was a group that was very, very dodgy. And I will also note, actually, for added effect of the, in this document, they have the word insurrectionist timeline, of which I perked up and immediately looked, because back in the CSGV days, there was an insurrectionist timeline, and it included me and my legal name. So, they're jerks. And I've got some bad blood for them, and I wish them ill. They published this comic book called Defending Democracy, and it's in the show notes if you want to read it. It's a PDF, and it is entirely bankrolled by Michael Bloomberg, and it's a great example of Michael Bloomberg got the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health so he could do what was done before the Dickey Amendment with CDC grant money, where gun control goons would fabricate completely BS reports that supported gun control scientifically, scare quotes, enacted, and claim that they had support for banning all our guns, and they were just garbage reports. And this is no different. And I'll just say that actually, Aaron, you asked me before this. You saw this like gigantic.
Well, it's not gigantic, but it's 32 pages.
Yeah, 32 pages. It is not light reading. If you wanted to read the whole thing, and even I didn't read the absolute every whole thing on this. But you're like, how much of this do I need to do? I said, you just need to skim it, because while it is 32 pages, it's like a loaf of Wonder Bread. You can wad the whole thing up into a ball the size of a golf ball. The greatest takeaway is they've got this line. It's right in page 4. It's one of the first pages of actual text. The First and Second Amendment do not protect the right to armed insurrection. Courts have not recognized the open carry of guns as speech protected under the First Amendment. If anything, the presence of guns at venues where political speech occurs, such as legislative buildings or demonstrations, imperils the existence of the First Amendment rights. Right. And a right to take up arms against the government has not been recognized by courts as a protection within the Second Amendment, and is incompatible with our democracy. Never mind the people who wrote it threw off the King of England.
Well, this is a perfect example of the winners write the history books, because if you revolt and you win, then you are revolutionaries fighting against an evil overlord. If you lose, you are traitors and deserve to be punished.
Yeah.
This is one of those cases where I can kind of see where they're coming from. I mean, no, the Constitution doesn't, protect against armed insurrection, because that is kind of antithetical to the government. But the Second Amendment does have a nod to sometimes you just got to overthrow some bitches. And so to me, it seems it's more a case of you better win, and you better have the moral high ground.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very similar to I was actually having a discussion with Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns about the fact that I dislike the fact that we call the American Civil War a civil war, because it was a war against two countries. It's just one country didn't acknowledge the existence of the other one. It was the Confederate States of America was a real country as far as I'm concerned, because they had their own money, they had their own government, they had their own president, they had their own military. They were recognized by other nations. Yeah, they were a country. Granted, they were part of the other country, and I've got very, very mixed feelings about how all of it goes on. I must say, I in the long, the short of it, I'm glad that we have a United States instead of a United States of America and a Confederate States of America. But either way, it was a secession war, not a civil war. And something more along the lines of, what was going on in Kosovo, or the Bolshevik Revolution, or the French Revolution, or the Cuban Revolution. Those are all more civil wars, in my opinion, where it was a war of ideology, not a land grab. But that's minutia. But either way, the fact that the Thomas Jefferson quote about the tree of liberty being watered by the blood of tyrants and patriots. Again, I always say Jefferson was talking about himself. Jefferson was legitimately concerned that he was going to get murdered by the people of the United States, and for good cause. And that was the reason why he was such a good president, and why the government was so benign for the longest time in the U.S. history, is because they were legitimately concerned about being overthrown. And so the idea that the Second Amendment doesn't cover insurrection. I mean, obviously it doesn't cover insurrection, because insurrection is a crime. If you're going to shoot for the king, if you're going to shoot at the king, you better not miss. Yeah. If you attempt to overthrow the government and you fail, yes, you're criminals and you're going to be executed. But at the same time, the Second Amendment exists so that you can attempt that in the event that the government becomes tyrannical. Battle of Athens. Oh yeah. Very good reference.
Battle of Athens, Tennessee. Post World War II. That's all I remember is 1940 something.
Yeah, search that on YouTube. There's a lot of good documentaries on that.
1946.
And they're all amazing. And it's actually something that I was only recently aware of. So yeah, if you're not aware of it, make yourself aware of it. But yeah, but for their references to why the insurrection, as they say it, is not supported under the Second Amendment, they reference the Oklahoma City bombing and the January 6th protest. I will say protest rather than insurrection, because the Oklahoma City bombing, number one, didn't use any guns. It did use arms in the form of explosives. I guess those count. But let's just say Timothy McVeigh was hardly a freedom fighter, or considered a freedom fighter by many. And his actions had minimal effect on the government and maximal effect on innocent lives. So screw that guy. And then the January 6th, as they call it, insurrection. How were we going to overthrow the government if nobody was armed? And many of the arms, weapons, and explosives that were recovered from that are under very, very dubious circumstances. So yeah, this is a comic book. This is very clearly Josh Horowitz shot an arrow and then drew a bullseye around it, in which the fact that all roads lead to gun control. And I guess I could go deeper in that, but I wanted to just that intro is all you really need to say is that they are completely ignoring the American Revolution, and those revolutionaries wrote the Second Amendment, and they throw in there's a bunch of, all these anti-gun groups are like insanely incestuous on every town will reference Mom Demands Actions and other groups and all that. They're referencing all these quote unquote studies. This is a bullcrap study that's referencing bullcrap studies that say, oh, states that adopted constitutional carry are more dangerous than states that don't. And literally their constitutional carry map includes Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, the safest states in the entire country. And so it is nonsense. It is crap. And this is the reason why we have the Dickey Amendment. And whenever you hear somebody say gun violence is a public health epidemic, these are people that are vowing to repeal the Dickey Amendment and get some CDC money, so that just like fellow NRA members like myself are paying for Wayne LaPierre to pay back the NRA for money that he stole from us. Also, they want every single taxpayer to be paying to write studies as dumb as this, and I highly recommend you read it. And speaking of junk studies, or speaking of junk that is studied, not junk studies, because there's there is a surprising amount of like actually really, really good research coming into this, is that ShotSpotter is like having a bad year. 2024 is not shaping up to be a good year for ShotSpotter. And for those that don't know, ShotSpotter is a technology, I use that term lightly, that is using acoustical microphones to triangulate gunshot, or to detect, identify, and triangulate gunshots. And a whole bunch of people have, I mean, for a long time, have been questioning the efficacy of this technology. And a whole bunch of states are questioning it and or dumping it. One of which is Chicago. Another one is North Carolina, are all going through. And interestingly enough, the North Carolina one, Duke University is actually conducting a study on whether or not it is valid. And interesting enough, Duke University harbors a number of extremely anti-gun professors that have worked very, very hard to oppose any sensible gun laws in North Carolina. But needless to say, I think we know, unless things aren't above board, the study's going to come back as it doesn't work. And I will say from personal experience, in Massachusetts, oh shoot, I should have pulled up a story on it. But it was a number of years ago. It was a drug related, essentially, hit where some people were actually dragged out of an apartment while sleeping and shot in the street. We call it the Mattapan Massacre. And let me see. Let me just do a quick Google search. It was 2010. In 2010, early in the morning, some people were dragged out of their apartment and shot in the streets in Boston. And Boston has the ShotSpotter system set up. And the police responded to the 911 calls before the system alerted that there were gunshots. So, yeah, that, and how are fireworks and car doors being slammed and industrial work and trash pickup and all that. How are those? There's suggestions that those might also be tripping the system. Overall, you don't hear a lot about arrests and crimes being stopped by ShotSpotter.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at this one paragraph talking about the Duke University study, and it said police could not confirm a shooting had taken place in 83% of ShotSpotter alerts. That's a lot. And they further qualify this. So that particular one it involves a 911 call. When there was no 911 call, but ShotSpotter went off, they couldn't confirm it 91% of the time. When there was a 911 call, but no ShotSpotter alert, 72% reports went unconfirmed. So, just to make that plain, without the system working at all, but people calling 911, the police had a better success rate than using ShotSpotter. That's pretty damning.
Yeah. Well, given that there's not even like a hallmark case, like so many instances where, somebody has, there's any, name a political instance. I'm not going to pick and choose one, but there's almost always a case that's paraded out on the, I'm a success case. This law saved me. This was wonderful. This was good. I can't think of a single case where they said, thanks to ShotSpotter, we caught this gang killer or this mass murderer or this spree killer. No, it's always been through 911 calls or various stuff. Like it cops never do. We got a call from ShotSpotter and we showed up on the scene and we found some suspicious people milling about and we searched them and they had guns on them and it was they were stolen guns and they were bad people and they had drugs and it was horrible and we put them away in prison.
Well,
Said
again,
no one
in that same article, they actually list one instance, and only one, where ShotSpotter may have saved a life. And it was in July of 2023. An officer's responding found a victim bleeding out, applied multiple tourniquets, and the victim survived. And the 911 call arrived 40 seconds after the ShotSpotter alert. And that's the only data point listed.
Huh. And yeah, given that, again, when it was minutes as far as the Mattapan massacre went, before ShotSpotter alerted that gunshots had been fired. So yeah, this is technology that is so good that David Chipman was one of the lead spokesmen for it. David Chipman, in case you forgot his name, was number one. He's a lobbyist for the Giffords group, and I have audio fist him on multiple occasions. But also he was Joe Biden's pick to be the director of the ATF before Steve Beeplesneitz. And I don't even remember what his real name is, but neither does Joe Biden. But he got people found out that he had some racial prejudices and had said some very untoward things towards some African-American members of the ATF. And that didn't bode very well for him, and his name was withdrawn. So this is the integrity of ShotSpotter. So yeah, the only thing I've ever seen ShotSpotter being effectively used for is anti-gun propaganda, talking about how many gunshots are detected in anti-gun cities that have lots of gun control anyway.
Oh, well, it's also great at draining money. And I think this is the real point that I want to make here, because you've always got the point of if it saves one life. Well, all right, but as an example here, the contract here, again, we're talking about Durham. The contract is $219,500 a year for 3 years. What could you do with more than $500,000, $658,500? What programs could you fund? What better uses of your tax base could you have? Perhaps you invest that into officer training or hiring more officers or things like that. And again, as they say in the article, I'm loving this MSN article. There was a 2% citywide increase in officer deployments associated with ShotSpotter responses. And remember, as we mentioned earlier, that most of the time they couldn't find anything. So you've got officers being deployed and finding nothing. And that's time that could be spent on patrols or investigations elsewhere. So they're actively taking police away from places where they could be doing good and sending them places where, 72% or more of the time, they don't find anything. This is not fiscally responsible. And so, yeah, there is a very cold calculation where you go, well, okay, what is the life of one human being worth? And these things suck. But that is what governments do. They have to prioritize. Is it efficient? Is it effective? Is this a good use of the money trying to save one person when we let, 5 people become victims of violent crime, for example? So it's not a comfortable discussion, and I'm glad I don't have to make it, but I don't want to seem cold, is what I'm getting at. I'm
Mhm.
saying there are much better uses of the time, the manpower, and the money than this system, which has been proven. I mean, it does work. It just doesn't work reliably.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to make. Of the, a life is priceless, maybe, but could you get a better return on that investment with some other methods,
Mm-hmm.
such as outfitting police with better body armor and better squad cars so that maybe they aren't so timid at patrolling gang-infested neighborhoods. That's certainly a major problem we have in Boston, which is that there are areas that are very, very violent and dangerous, and the cops don't go there unless they absolutely have to. And maybe it would be better serve everybody if they were patrolling that area so they could actually catch people in the act of doing horrible antisocial things and save some lives.
Now, if I recall correctly, isn't Boston the city that at one point, and it may still be, had a neighborhood that was referred to as the combat zone?
Yes, the zone is gone now, but yes, it was. I believe it was kind of similar. I think it went away in the 90s. So it was the zone has not existed since I've lived in the Metro Boston area. But yeah, it was an area that was around Chinatown and was the area where police were laissez-faire for drugs and prostitution and that sort of thing. So if you were looking for some, let's say, unsavory refreshments, the combat zone was the place to go. And it was called the combat zone because your safety was not guaranteed and the police were not going to be very concerned. But yeah, no, the combat zone is gone. That got dissolved. I again, it was before my time living in Massachusetts, so I can't give you the inner workings of the politics there, but there are still dangerous neighborhoods in Boston where police do not patrol. There was an area, unfortunately, I tried to look up the news story of it a little while ago and I wasn't able to find it, but there was a massive block party. I can't remember if it was in Mattapan or Jamaica Plain, but it was in one of those two neighborhoods of Boston. There was a massive block party and there was something like over 100 911 calls for either noise ordinance violations, they're playing loud music, to there's a fight, there's people are firing guns in the air and all that. And only until someone's shot and there's a dead body in the middle of the street, only then did the police respond. And that's no way to keep a community safe. So yeah, no way is Aaron saying, no, I don't want to spend that much money to save a human life. Is the no, I want to save a human life, but I'd like my money to go a little bit further.
Let's see about saving multiple human lives for that money.
Yes. Yeah, let's save a whole bunch of human lives on the dollar menu. Kids, ask your folks.
So I'm calling David's segment, haha, 3D printer go brrr.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. As regular listeners to the blooper reels know, Oddball and I are part of the 3D printing community. He's considerably further along the learning curve than I am. So in this segment, I'd like to talk about some of the trials and tribulations from a newbie to the world of 3D printers and printing. The first thing to be done is buying a printer. There are many of them on the market with a variety of features and abilities and a wide range of price tags. Names such as Bambu, Creality, Prusa, Voron, and more are frequently tossed around. The number one recommended beginner printer seems to be the Creality Ender 3, in my case the V2 model. The V3 has been released since I got mine, and by all accounts it's worth the increase in price tag. Some of the upgrade features I'll mention in a moment come standard on the new version of this printer. 3D printers can frequently be found on sale either online through sites like Woot or in stores such as a Micro Center. Assembly and setup isn't terribly difficult, as long as you can use basic hand tools and follow printed directions. One of the first upgrades most 3D printers usually get is replacing the extruder feeder parts with metal ones, as well as replacing the springs and adjustment knobs for the print bed. This leads directly to where the trouble really begins, when it's time to level the bed for the first time. Bed leveling, also called tramming, is one of the larger bugaboos of the printer world. It takes time, patience, and close attention to fine details. The purpose of this operation is to make sure the print nozzle, the part where the melted plastic exits onto the print bed, is neither too close nor too far away from that bed. Both of these extremes will cause problems. Either prints not adhering to the bed properly or adhering all too well. The latter potentially causing damage to the bed when a print is removed. From what I've read, optimal distance is approximately 0.1 millimeters between the nozzle and the bed, or about the thickness of a piece of printer paper. However, a metal feeler gauge of the appropriate size is more precise. The frustration from attempting and repeatedly failing in this operation caused me to walk away from my printer for a few months. Until that is, Oddball came to my rescue once again. As a gift, he sent me one of the best upgrades to reduce the aggravation involved with bed leveling. Called the CR Touch, it's a small mechanism attached to the side of the print head and a software package that enables the printer to check bed leveling automatically. This improvement comes standard on the Ender 3 V3 printer. The bed still needs to be leveled manually first, but once that's done, the printer can more easily maintain proper offset. For me, this was a game changer. I went from angrily attempting to relevel the bed repeatedly after each failed print to near perfect prints most of the time. Thanks again, Oddball. Speaking of prints, in order to print something, we need design files. There are a number of online resources where these can be found. Thingiverse and Printables are two of the more well-known and popular ones, but there are many others, including sites hosting designs specific to the 3D printed firearms community. Can't stop the signal. For those with graphic design skill, there are also tools available for creating our own designs, such as Tinkercad. I've uploaded a few of my own to Thingiverse and Printables myself. Once a print is acquired, generally as an STL file, it needs to be run through what's called a slicer. This is a program that uses G-code to create the toolpath and extrusion details the printer needs to actually print. I use Ultimaker Cura, but there are other slicers available as well. Within these programs, we can rotate and scale our models, as well as adjust print specifications such as temperature, speed, quality, and a million other options. I'm only reasonably familiar with a couple dozen of these settings myself. Once the sliced file has been output and transferred to the printer, we still need filament. The most common filament on the market right now is PLA, which stands for polylactic acid. The current version, PLA Plus, can be found in a bewildering array of colors and, if bought in bulk, for a reasonable price. I've been happy with the filament I've ordered online from IIIDMax. After everything has been set in motion, all that's left is to cross our fingers and wait. If all goes well, in a few hours we'll have a completed print. If not, we'll have a print bed full of what's appropriately called spaghetti. My very first successful print was one that came with the basic printer files, a Lucky Cat. Since then, I've downloaded and printed a variety of decorative and useful objects. But as a tradition, and possibly some superstition, with each new filament color, I print a Lucky Cat first. More recently, as my skill and confidence have increased, I've started printing firearm parts, starting with relatively simple things such as grips, optic mounts, and forends, then moving on to more complex items such as linear compensators. I've printed two of these, the first for a 5.56 AR and the other for 1 in 300 blackout. They came out beautifully, and I've run a couple of magazines through the 5.56 one with no issues. My next achievement goal is printing a framer receiver. Maybe this is how I finally get a Glock. No weird, I will not be printing a Glong. I know I've left out a number of important 3D printing details, and I may have gotten some of the ones I did talk about wrong. But as I said, I'm still a novice in this world, and I know I still have much to learn. So for those of our listeners who are interested, go forth and print. May your bed always be level, and your spaghetti only be the kind cooked for dinner.
It's a Glong, yeah, the Glong. It's a Glock that's also a bomb. It's the Glong.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weird will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor to the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena Bock and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
I won't lie. There's a part of me that really wants to make all the cool stuff I see David and Oddball make. And then there's a part of me that hears about all these printer issues and pictures showing the spaghetti incidents. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't need a 3D printer.
Yeah, I would recommend that you personally hold off on buying one until either you move out of Massachusetts to free America or you get a different governor, because given Mara Healy's track record already, you've got a 3D printer, you now have the potential to create a ghost gun. That's constructive possession. That's illegal.
Yes. Yeah, that is all of the anti-gun states are. I'm unaware of any anti-gun state that's not currently fielding legislation against 3D printers. So yeah, there's also that. Yes, very much so. Yeah, and I will also note that if you heard that song that David sampled about the Glong, which is the Glock, but also it's a bong. He linked the video in the show notes, and if you haven't seen it, you absolutely need to watch that music video.
Glong, there we go. Oh, okay, it's Print Shoot Repeat. That guy. Listen, I need you to hit me like you mean it.
I didn't come here for you to be... and I'm sure we saw that guy's actual face, but not at the same time where he was in character.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So closing out the show, Xander has yet another segment on farming. And in this one, he now sows his seed.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. When we last left our fictional field, it had been cleared, tiled, and tilled. Time to poke seeds in the ground and relax. Except it's more complicated than that if you're doing more than just a backyard garden. First, normally the seed is bought months beforehand. Given Michigan's growing season, and if it looks to be a dry enough spring that we can get the corn planted soon enough, we'll look at one at 108-day corn. That's how many days it takes to mature. We're going for a grain rather than forage variety, as well as something Roundup resistant due to the needs of weed control later on. It's a bit more expensive, but the better yields should be worth it. We've had plenty of years when equipment problems, weather, or both pushed planting off to where we had to return the longer day corn and get shorter maturity hybrids instead. Many farms, ours included, will spray the fields with Roundup, atrazine, 2,4-D, or some other herbicide or mix of herbicides to kill off weeds before planting. Sometimes it is done ahead of tillage, sometimes before planting, if there was too much of a wait between. Herbicides and timing must be carefully selected, because we don't want to accidentally kill or damage the crop before it even gets started. Over-application is at best a waste of money, and drift is undesirable because we don't want to waste money spraying weeds not on the fields to be planted, or worse, ruining a neighbor's lawn. Spraying is more critical if farming no-till, as there's no mechanical weed control at all. Every farm has a different approach to the planting process, which can also change over time. At one point, we tried to do single pass with everything, including spraying, fertilizing, as well as the planting. These days, the spraying is done separately. Our planter is set up for 22-inch rows, and it has a custom 18-row deer, and it is a custom 18-row deer that was originally 16 rows that folds for transport. The tanks mounted on the planter hold liquid fertilizer, and of course there's hoppers in the back for the corn seed. The planter and tractor are set up with narrow tires on the tractor, spaced to go between rows to prevent compaction. The corn planter has blades that open up the soil to dribble the liquid fertilizer into, offset from the corn rows. This is to prevent accidentally killing the seedlings from overwhelming them with toxic levels of nutrients until they can be established plants and grow roots into the deposits. Our fertilizer, for starting out, uses a blend of liquid 28% nitrogen solution and a starter fertilizer tailored for what our corn will need. We also mix in soluble zinc for what becomes trace amounts when applied. Overall, we found that the liquid is easier to deal with and doesn't rust equipment out as fast as the dry fertilizers. Those also absorb moisture from the air and turn into rock-like chunks that need to be broken up. The drawback is hoses and lines rub through, valves wear out, and so on. It's just that these issues are a lot more acceptable than the ones with the dry fertilizer. The seed metering system is adjusted for the population desired by selecting wheel-driven chain sprockets, much like a multi-speed bicycle. The gears can't be selected on the fly. The chain is moved by hand when the machine is stationary. There is a confusing series of drive shafts that bring the motion to all the hoppers through clutches that engage when the machine is unfolded for operation. This is all to spin plastic discs with divots and holes. A hydraulic-driven vacuum pump sucks the seeds against the divots of the seed discs, which drop them down a carefully angled and curved tube. The tube terminates between two angled blades that park the soil down to a set depth. We go with about 2 inches, though deeper if the soil is too dry, such that they land at a consistent spacing without rolling or bouncing. A light-based sensor is in each tube to inform the tractor driver as to whether each row is working correctly, including if individual seeds are being missed or if somehow extra seeds are being dropped. Lastly, a pair of wheels close the seed trench gently. On either side of the planter are the iconic marker arms, a long arm that extends half again the width of the planter with a single disc blade that simply marks a line for the next pass. Ideally, the driver centers on the mark well enough that come harvest time, you can't really tell one pass from the next by any gaps or close-spaced rows. We also want the corn to shade out potential weeds later on, effectively choking out competing plants without affecting the desired yield. It's a lot of work, but far less than years past. Even with 30-inch rows, a 6 or 8 row planter took a lot of time to cover the same amount of ground that I recall from my youth. My grandfather had a longer time during the days of horses. He would take a small cart of sorts, with a pair of sticks or such 3 feet apart, and go up and down the field, putting one on the previous pass, then go crosswise on the field to make a grid. He would then put a couple crates or boxes on the edge of the field, one of seed and one of fertilizer, and load up the hoppers on a handheld device that vaguely resembled a jackhammer. At each intersection of the grid, he jammed the device into the ground and worked the handles, putting a glob of fertilizer and a few kernels of corn into the ground, then take a step and repeat, for acre upon acre. Soybeans can also be done with the row planter, just like corn, or it can be done with what we call a grain drill planter. This has rows just a few inches apart, staggered as well. Some machines are no-till capable, others are more lightly built for only planting in tilled ground and costing less. These also have very different fertilizer requirements than corn, and most grain drills have no provision for fertilizer application along with planting. Now that planting is done, we can finally rest for a few minutes as we get the equipment put away for next year. Have fun, be safe, and I hope it gave you something to think about. Oh, and Weird has a couple more links to add.
Da boop! Loud boop!
On second thought, let's not go to Xander's farm. 'Tis a seedy place.
Oh man, I mean, I gotta say, it was really, really cool to hear. Again, it's always neat to see like what I do by hand in my garden. Kind of, my garden was completely full of weeds all this year, but I'm buying some scorpion peppers. I'm growing scorpion peppers this year. But the idea of the optical system that's catching the seeds falling through, it makes perfect sense, but I just never thought of it because, yeah, if like a seed gets stuck in one of the feed chutes, I mean, that might be like 100 feet of row that doesn't get planted, and that's a big problem. and also a pain in the butt to redo when you're doing like 30, 40 acres. So yeah, I love this series. This is like super duper interesting to me.
I have to confess that when Xander started to get super technical, it started to sound like the turbo encabulator, and I really didn't follow it.
Well, I had the extra advantage of the fact that did you check all his show notes? Because he's in the show notes. He's got pictures of all the various farm implements that he's talking about. So
no, I have not.
Yeah. So yeah. Check your show notes. It's likely in the in whatever app you are using for the to listen to this podcast. I actually haven't checked the is it Pocket Cast? Yeah, Pocket Cast is what you recommended to me. Of which, Google Podcast is dead to me now. Aaron, you picked a good one.
Great.
And thank you so much. I really do appreciate it because I did try. They're like, oh, try YouTube podcast. No, it sucks. It doesn't work. And so, like, I even attempted, like, searched Assorted Calibers podcast. Didn't come up. Like, okay, so what am I supposed to do here? So, yeah, I forgot to check our show notes on Pocket Cast to see if you can click over to the various links on it, but it should work. But yeah, either way, on your various podcast apps, you can also check out the show notes, but you can also go to assortedcalibers.com. So yeah, go look at Xander's pictures, and David has a whole bunch of pictures of the various stuff that he printed as well. So the show notes are awesome. We work really hard at them, so you should look at them.
I'm pretty sure there is a tab in Pocket Cast where you can like check an episode synopsis and there's a link. I'm just not sure if that's something you have to do specially or if it imports it. I don't know how easy it would be for you to do.
Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to search.
Okay.
Oh, look at that. The show notes are beautiful. And look, I'm going to go look at Xander's chisel plow from last. Yeah, no, in Pocket Cast, it looks beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I also a recommend for if you are on an Android device and you don't have Apple Podcast, the Pocket Cat, and you're concerned about the Google Podcast going away, which it may or may not. It's supposed to go away on April 1st, which makes me wonder.
It's a bad choice of a date for sure.
It's a really bad choice of a date. But either way, whether it's a joke or not, guess what? Joke's on you. Aaron recommended Pocket Cast, and it's awesome.
Yay.
But you know who else is awesome, Aaron?
Well, me.
Aaron is awesome. That is correct. I'd like to thank Aaron Paulette, each and every Aaron Paulette. Thank you so much, Aaron Paulette. You are awesome. And because you are the co-host of the Assorted Caliber podcast, you don't need to be a subscriber on Patreon because you already have access to all these things because you do the show with me.
I know, I really screwed things up for you.
I'm enjoying it. I'm improvising.
Oh, good.
We're going off-road. Where we're going, we don't need road. But if you too would like to also be awesome like Aaron Paulette, you can go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast and sign up and become a Patreon member. And patrons get, it's not a charity. You're getting stuff. You get an early use of the podcast, but you can also get bonus content like the blooper reels, the ACB film tracks where we watch movies and supply our wonderful commentary, and the ACB mag dump. So these are all good things. If you like this show, you'll like those too.
Or as I call it, talking over a perfectly good movie that I'm trying to watch.
I mean, if you're like Aaron Paulette, then you'll hate the ACB film tracks. If you're like Weirdbeard and you're talking over a movie, whether there are people listening or not, you'll love the ACB film tracks.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, because that's the only place where you can rate a podcast, last I checked. Subscribe to us on the platform of your choice. Weird and I endorse Pocket Casts.
Pocket Casts is awesome.
It's a free app for Android. And share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's called weirdworlds.com. That's WEERDworld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
Assuming I get out of this creative funk that I'm in, you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Wow, I got nothing.
Aaron's got nothing, and I got a liver full of rum. Our sobriety is assorted, and so's our podcast.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.